She's fleeing down a highway in her torn wedding dress when he skids his truck to a stop, a scarred ex-military single dad with nothing left to lose. What begins as a rescue turns into a desperate cross-country escape and a love neither of them saw coming. Like stories packed with adrenaline, slow-burn romance, and high-stakes heartbeats, smash that like and subscribe for more. Rain clung to the air like a second skin, drenching everything in a thick curtain of silver. The wind shoved at the trees and howled through the narrow stretch of two-lane highway that cut through a forgotten patch of southern Tennessee. Lightning split the sky, flashing white across the dark woods before disappearing again, leaving the landscape darker than before. The road was nearly empty, save for a rusted green pickup truck grumbling along in the storm, its tires slick against the pavement. Logan Shaw gripped the steering wheel with one calloused hand, his other resting near the gear shift as his eyes flicked between the road and the horizon. His jaw tightened as another bolt of lightning struck in the distance, momentarily illuminating the dashboard and the faded photo taped beside the radio. A girl, maybe 6, beamed into the camera, missing a front tooth. His daughter. The reason he kept going when every part of him wanted to stop. He was headed home from a job upstate, the kind of cash-under-the-table work that paid enough to keep the lights on but not enough to fix the leak in his roof. The world outside the truck was a wet blur of trees and rain, the kind of scenery that asked nothing of him and gave even less. He preferred it that way. Solitude had become a sort of refuge. Quiet roads and the hum of the engine didn't ask questions or look at him like he was broken. But then she appeared. At first, he thought it was the storm playing tricks on him, just a shape in the road. Then the figure moved again, running into his high beams, arms flailing. Logan slammed the brakes. The truck fishtailed for a breathless second before it skidded to a halt. His heart thundered in his chest. Rain hammered the windshield. She was soaked to the bone, standing barefoot in the middle of the road, wearing what looked like a wedding dress torn at the hem. Her veil clung to her shoulders, plastered by rain, and she had one high heel in her hand like a weapon. Mascara ran in rivers down her cheeks. Her chest heaved. She stared at the truck like she wasn't sure if she'd just been saved or hit. Logan threw the truck into park and jumped out. He didn't say anything at first, just took her in, the white fabric clinging to her like a second skin, the panic in her eyes sharper than any blade. "You all right?" he asked, his voice deep and steady, even as confusion curled in his gut. "Please," she said, and the word came out cracked. "I need to get out of here. Anywhere but here. Just don't ask questions. Please, just drive." She glanced over her shoulder like someone was seconds behind her. He looked too, scanning the tree line, but saw nothing. "I don't usually pick up strangers," he said, "especially not ones dressed for church and looking like they've been through a tornado. I'm not a stranger. I'm just a girl who made a mistake." Her voice trembled, more with fear than cold. "If you don't help me, he'll find me, and I can't go back." Logan hesitated. Every part of him said, "Walk away." This wasn't his problem. Hell, it was barely his town. But her voice triggered something in the back of his memory, a ghost of another night, another woman crying, another plea unanswered. He cursed under his breath. "Get in." She didn't wait to be told twice. She scrambled into the passenger seat, soaked fabric pooling at her feet, as she slammed the door behind her. He got back in, shoved the truck into gear, and pulled away, wipers swiping furiously as the world narrowed to the road ahead. For a while, neither of them spoke. The storm drowned out any need for words. The heater struggled to dry the air, but steam still rose off her skin like she'd walked out of a battlefield instead of a chapel. She held the high heel in her lap like it was the last thing tethering her to the life she'd just escaped. "Name?" he asked, not looking over. She hesitated. "Madeline. Maddie." He didn't return the favor. She didn't ask. After another mile, she broke the silence. "You're not going to ask where I came from?" "Nope." "Why not?" "Figured you'd tell me when you're ready. Or not at all. Either way, I'm not your priest. She exhaled, somewhere between a laugh and a sob. You're the first person who hasn't tried to make me explain myself since this whole mess started. Well, that dress kind of does the talking for you, he said dryly. You bail on a wedding, I'm guessing? She nodded slowly. Right at the altar. He whistled low. Hell of a time to grow a backbone. Madeline turned to the window. Her fingers trembled against the fogged glass. It wasn't just cold feet. He didn't answer. She didn't elaborate. They drove for another hour, the storm eventually fading into drizzle, the sky softening into a muted gray. Logan pulled into a gas station near a rest stop and killed the engine. Bathroom's inside. They've probably got coffee if you want some. I'll get fuel. She blinked at him. You're still helping me? He turned to look at her for the first time since they left the road. His eyes were the color of smoke, sharp and guarded, but not unkind. You asked me to drive, he said. You didn't say where, so unless you got a destination now, we're just going to keep moving. Madeline stared at him, her throat working like she couldn't decide whether to cry again or say thank you. In the end, she opened the door and stepped out into the morning haze. Logan watched her disappear into the gas station, his gut twisted. He'd done tours in 3 countries, been shot at, nearly blown up, and abandoned by his own government. But something about this woman, about her bare feet and haunted eyes, made the hair on his neck rise. He told himself this was temporary, just one good deed, then he'd drop her off at the next safe place and be done with it. But deep down, he already knew. He wasn't going to stop. Not yet. Not with the way she looked at him like he was the only chance she had left. And damn him, part of him didn't want her to stop running either. The coffee she brought back to the truck was hot, watery, and probably old, but Logan drank it without complaint. Madeline held her own cup in both hands like it was some fragile thing she might crush if she wasn't careful. She ditched the veil in the bathroom and found a pair of cheap flip-flops in the corner display. Her wedding dress, still damp, had been knotted at the knees for easier walking, and she'd borrowed a brown gas station hoodie from the clearance rack. The white lace poked out from underneath it like a ghost of whatever life she had walked away from. He glanced over as she settled in. Her eyes were less wild now, but there was still a tremor in her fingers every time she brought the cup to her lips. She noticed him watching and gave him a tired sort of smile, the kind you put on when you've run out of ways to say thank you but still feel like you owe something. You sure you don't want to leave me here? She asked softly, her voice steadier than it had been before. I mean, this place has people, security cameras. You could tell yourself you did the good deed and drive off with a clean conscience. Logan shook his head slowly. I don't do clean consciences, never had much luck with them. That made her smirk. Fair enough. They got back on the road, no destination spoken aloud, but a mutual understanding growing between them. She didn't ask about his past, and he didn't push about hers. But silence has a way of thinning out after too long, especially when it's filled with questions neither of them wanted to be the first to ask. Madeline was the one who broke it. I was supposed to marry a man named Harrison, she said, her voice low and even, as if reciting a story that had already been turned into someone else's nightmare. His family owns half of Nashville's downtown real estate. His grandfather started the Carrington Bank. That's the kind of money we're talking about. Logan didn't comment. He kept his eyes on the road but nodded so she'd know he was listening. My parents said it was a match made in heaven. I think they meant for their stock portfolio, not for my actual life. I went along with it for a while. It was easier to smile and nod than to argue. They had this whole story built around me already, and trying to tear it down would have meant losing everything. Or at least, that's what they wanted me to believe. She turned to face him. Her legs were pulled up under her on the seat, the dress still clinging to her skin. But it wasn't just pressure. Harrison, he wasn't who he pretended to be. In private, he'd turn. Quick temper, worse hands, always made sure the bruises were where no one else could see. Said I needed to learn how to behave like a proper wife. that if I pushed him, I deserved what I got. Logan gripped the wheel tighter, the muscles in his forearms flexing beneath the flannel sleeves. He didn't say a word, but something shifted in the air between them. I told my mother once, she continued. You know what she said? That I needed to be more understanding, that men like Harrison were under pressure, that he didn't mean it. Logan exhaled through his nose. Sounds like your mother's the one who didn't mean it. Madeline gave a hollow laugh. She meant every word. My whole life I've been managed, educated, trained, posed. I wasn't raised. I was groomed for a role. Trophy wife. Perfect daughter. I've never even pumped my own gas until tonight. He let that sit for a beat, then finally asked, So what made you run? She looked out the window, watching the world roll by like it had answers she hadn't found yet. He grabbed my wrist too hard when we were waiting to walk down the aisle. It was subtle, like always, just enough pressure to remind me I belonged to him. He leaned in real close and said, Try anything, and I'll make sure no one finds you, not even your bones. Her voice cracked then, just slightly. That was the moment I knew. If I married him, he'd kill me. Maybe not right away, maybe not with his hands, but piece by piece, I'd vanish. Logan didn't speak for a long time. The hum of the road filled the cab, rain still whispering along the roof. When he did finally say something, it was quiet, measured. You made the right call. I left my phone at the church, she said. Ditched it in the flower arrangement. Figured they'd use it to track me. They would have, Logan said. He glanced at her again. The hoodie made her look smaller, like someone trying to hide from the world in plain sight. But her eyes were sharp now, watching him like she needed to figure him out before she could let herself relax. What about you? She asked. What's your story? I don't hear much of a southern accent. I'm from Oklahoma, he said. Army for 10 years. Then got out. Tried to settle down. Didn't take. You married? Was. She left after our daughter was born. Didn't like the way I brought the war home with me. Madeline tilted her head, studying him. Did you? Some days more than others. He reached for the faded photo taped beside the dashboard. The little girl's smile was bright enough to cut through any cloud. That's Emma, he said. She's with my mom for the summer while I pick up extra work, trying to save enough to fight for more custody. Right now I get 1 weekend a month and every other Christmas. That's what the court said was fair. Madeline looked at the photo, then at Logan. Her expression softened in a way he hadn't expected. She's beautiful. Got her mama's smile. Thank God for that. Madeline hesitated, then said, You think she'd like me? Logan gave her a look that held more weight than the question deserved. You're a runaway bride, with bruises hidden under a borrowed hoodie. I think my daughter would think you're a superhero. The words landed heavy, but Madeline didn't look away. She sat back in the seat, pulled the hoodie tighter, and let out a long breath that sounded like relief. Where are we going? She asked. Logan shrugged. Somewhere they won't look for you. Somewhere I've got friends who won't ask questions. She nodded. Okay. And then, quieter, like she was still convincing herself, she repeated it. Okay. The knock at the motel door came just after midnight. It was sharp and deliberate. 3 quick raps, a pause, and then another 2. Logan was already up. He had not been sleeping anyway, just sitting on the edge of the bed with one boot still on, staring into the dark and listening to the wheeze of the old air conditioner in the wall. He had heard a car engine hum into the parking lot, slow and idle too long, then cut off. The knock came next. Madeline sat upright in the bed before he even moved. She had not been asleep either, just dozing under the extra blanket he had given her. Her eyes locked onto his, and in them was something between a question and a plea. He nodded once and raised a finger to his lips. He crossed the room silently, lifted the curtain with the corner of one finger, and peered out. The security light buzzed just above the motel's check-in office, casting a pool of yellow across the lot. There was no one outside their door. Another knock. This one came from the next door down. Logan dropped the curtain and moved to the nightstand, opening the drawer. He pulled out the pistol he had placed there earlier, checking it once before standing by the door. Madeline drew the blanket tighter around herself and watched him with wide eyes. Footsteps moved down the walkway. Then silence. Logan waited another full minute before stepping back and placing the gun on the dresser. He did not relax, not really, but the tension in his shoulders eased a fraction. "It's fine," he said, voice low. "Someone probably trying the wrong room. Maybe drunk, maybe worse. Either way, they're gone now." Madeline nodded but said nothing. Her breathing was shallow, her hand gripping the edge of the blanket until her knuckles turned white. Logan leaned against the wall and folded his arms. "You want me to check the car?" She shook her head quickly. "No, don't leave." He didn't. They stayed like that for a long while, neither speaking. The motel walls were thin. Somewhere 2 rooms over, a television buzzed with late-night news. A man coughed. A woman laughed too loudly, her voice slurred with drink. Eventually, Madeline lay back down, though she did not close her eyes. By morning, the parking lot was empty, except for Logan's truck and a delivery van with one flat tire. Logan scanned the area before letting Madeline out of the room. She had changed into a pair of cheap jeans and a plain shirt, both bought from a 24-hour gas station down the road. The wedding dress had been stuffed into a trash bag and left in the motel's dumpster, buried under empty pizza boxes and coffee cups. They got back on the road without breakfast. Logan kept checking the rearview mirror, not because he expected to see someone, but because he had learned long ago that danger rarely made noise when it came. After an hour, Madeline asked the question that had been circling since the night before. "You think they're looking for me yet?" "They?" "My family. Harrison. His people." Logan's jaw tensed. "If they're not now, they will be. That kind of money doesn't let anything disappear quietly." Madeline swallowed hard. "I left everything. My phone, my purse, even my ID. I figured the less they had to track me, the better. It was smart." She looked out the window. "I still feel like I'm being watched." "That feeling doesn't go away," Logan said. "But it keeps you alert. That's not always a bad thing." She turned back to him. "You said you know places. Friends. You trust them?" "I trust the ones who know how to keep their mouths shut." They drove in silence after that, winding through back roads and side highways, away from major cities, away from anything predictable. Logan took routes he had learned from his years in the service, the kind of paths that did not show up on regular maps. Madeline watched the world pass, noting how the land changed from flat to rolling hills, the trees thickening, the sky opening. They stopped once at a rundown diner for breakfast. Logan paid in cash. Madeline ate 3 pieces of bacon and half a slice of toast before pushing her plate away. "I keep thinking someone's going to walk through the door and recognize me." Logan glanced at the other customers, most of them older locals or tired truckers. None of them had given her a second look. "They're not," he said. "Not here. Not dressed like that. You're just another traveler now." Her lips twitched, not quite a smile. "You make it sound like I've always been on the run." He looked at her carefully. "Maybe you have." They got back on the road before the lunch crowd started coming in. By late afternoon, Logan noticed the black SUV in the mirror. It was a newer model, sleek and clean. The kind of car no one drove on a back highway unless they were looking for something or someone. He did not say anything at first, just took the next left down a narrow gravel road and watched the SUV continue straight past them. But then it reappeared half an hour later, coming from a different direction. Madeline noticed the shift in his posture. "What is it?" "Hang on," he said. He made another turn, then another, doubling back twice until he was sure the SUV was following. Madeline gripped the dashboard. "Do you think it's him?" "Could be. Could be someone working for him." "What do we do?" Logan tapped the wheel with one finger, mind racing through options. Then he looked at her. "We make it harder." He turned off onto a dirt road, that ran through a thicket of trees. It was narrow, just wide enough for the truck, and full of dips and branches. Madeline clung to the seat as the truck bumped along. "You sure this leads somewhere?" she asked. "I'm sure it leads away." The road spat them out on a forgotten highway about 20 minutes later. Logan didn't see the SUV again. Not yet. He drove another hour before pulling into a secluded clearing surrounded by pine trees and brush. There was an old logging trail leading into the woods, nearly invisible to anyone not looking for it. He shut off the engine and turned to Madeline. "We're going to lay low for the night. If they're serious about following us, they'll come back, and when they do, I want to be ready." Madeline nodded. She looked more alert than scared now. That same fire he had seen on the side of the road when she jumped in his truck had returned. "I don't want to run forever," she said. "You won't," Logan said. "But tonight, we don't let them catch up." She stared into the trees, eyes narrowing, voice steady. "Good. Because if they come, I want to be ready too." And for the first time since she had bolted from that wedding aisle, Logan saw her not as a passenger, not as a problem, but as someone who had survived something dark and was ready to fight for her own escape. He looked toward the road they had left behind and felt something new take root inside him. A sense of purpose. Not just to keep her safe, but to make sure the people chasing her never got close again. By the time the sun dipped low behind the trees, Logan had already gathered enough firewood for the night and scouted the perimeter of the clearing twice. The air was cooler now, dry and hushed, the way forests tend to quiet themselves before dusk. Birds chirped in fading bursts, and crickets began their early evening rise. The forest had a rhythm all its own, and Logan had long ago learned how to fall in step with it. Madeline crouched near the fire pit Logan had built from stone and packed earth. She watched him with a curious mix of skepticism and admiration as he knelt down and lit a small pile of dry moss. The flame caught quickly and licked upward, hungry and bright, warming the space between them. He fed it slowly, methodically, until it was steady and strong. When he leaned back on his heels and glanced up at her, he caught her staring. "You ever been camping?" he asked, reaching for his coffee tin. She shook her head. "Closest I got was a glamping retreat in Sedona. Air-conditioned tents, champagne in the fridge. I hated it." Logan raised an eyebrow. "Yeah, this ain't that." Madeline smiled. Not the tight, brittle kind she had worn in the truck, but something looser, real. She drew the borrowed hoodie tighter around herself and let her fingers hover over the fire. "I didn't know how quiet it could be out here. It's not like the silence at home. That kind always felt sharp, like it was waiting to snap. This is different. Still, but safer." He nodded. "Out here, things are simpler. You stay warm, stay fed, stay alert. Everything else just gets in the way." She nodded and looked down at her hands. They were cleaner now, though the scrapes and bruises along her knuckles still spoke louder than words. Her wedding ring was gone. She had tossed it in a rest stop, sink somewhere along the state line. The tan mark it left behind was fading, but not gone. "Teach me," she said suddenly. Logan looked at her. "Teach you what?" "Everything. How to survive out here, how to take care of myself. I don't want to be helpless. Not anymore." He studied her face, the lines of determination etched between fear and resolve. She meant it. She wasn't asking for charity. She was asking for power, for agency, for something she had never been allowed to hold before. "You sure?" he asked. She met his gaze squarely. "I want to know what you know, even just some of it." Logan nodded slowly. He grabbed his pack and pulled out the small handgun she had seen once before, the one he kept near the driver's seat. He checked the chamber, handed it to her with the grip pointed toward her chest. Her eyes widened, but she didn't flinch. She took it carefully, fingers curling around the grip with awkward tension. "You ever fire one of these?" he asked. "No, my father hated guns, said they were uncivilized." She smirked slightly. "He owned 6. "Of course he did." Logan said with a quiet laugh. Okay, first rule. Finger off the trigger until you're ready to shoot. Always point it away from people. Always assume it's loaded. Got it? She nodded, repeating the rules under her breath. Logan took her through it slowly. How to hold it, how to stand, how to find balance. He set up an old tin can against a fallen log and gave her a few dry-fire drills before he let her load the magazine. Her first shot missed wide and startled the birds out of the trees. The second shot clipped the edge of the log. By the fourth, the can flipped over with a hollow ping. Madeline laughed. The sound burst from her like it had been waiting a long time to be heard. She looked over at him, flushed and beaming, her face glowing in the firelight. That felt really good. Logan smiled, just a little. You're a quick study. They sat back down near the fire, sharing a can of beans and jerky, the kind of meal that barely qualified as food but tasted like something close to freedom in the moment. The night grew darker around them, the stars pricking through the trees. Somewhere an owl called once, low and distant. Madeline leaned back on her elbows, gazing up at the sky. Do you miss it? She asked. The military, that life. He was quiet for a moment. Sometimes it had purpose, rules. You knew what you were walking into, even when it was hell. After I got out, everything felt aimless. I didn't know how to be around normal people, didn't know how to stop waiting for the next order. She turned her head to look at him. And now? Now I've got Emma. She's the one thing that makes sense. Everything I do, every job I take, every fight I pick, it's for her. Madeline reached for the photo she had seen him keep in his wallet, the one of the smiling girl with a tooth missing and a streak of mud on her cheek. She ran her thumb across the edge. She's lucky to have you. I'm lucky to have her, he said. Her mother and I weren't a good fit. She thought I'd come back from war and become someone different. Softer, easier. I didn't. And when she left, she made sure the court knew exactly how hard I'd been to live with. Madeline looked at him carefully. Were you? He met her eyes without flinching. Some days, yeah. I was angry, lost, didn't know how to put the pieces back together. But I never hurt her, and I never raised my voice to my daughter. The system doesn't always care about the truth, though. It cares about appearances, about who can tell the better story. She nodded, understanding flickering in her expression. You and I aren't all that different, she said softly. People saw our lives from the outside and assumed they knew what was going on, assumed we were fine. But you weren't, Logan said, and neither were you. The fire crackled, sending sparks upward into the dark. Madeline wrapped her arms around her knees and leaned toward the flames. I think I stopped being fine when I was 12. That's when they started picking out schools for me, matching me with boys I'd never spoken to, building the blueprint for my life without asking if I wanted it. I was just a project to them, something to show off at fundraisers and charity balls. She glanced at him, eyes glistening but clear. I don't want to be anyone's project ever again. You won't be, Logan said. His voice held no doubt. They sat together in the stillness, no longer strangers, but something not quite defined. The woods wrapped around them, dark and quiet and ancient, holding their secrets like a promise. And for the first time in years, Madeline felt the world stop chasing her, if only for one night. The cabin sat at the top of a sloping hill, surrounded by tall pines and silent air. Logan had not been back in nearly 6 months, but it still looked the same. Weather-worn siding, front porch sagging in the corners, a crooked wind chime hanging by a single nail. It was not much, but it was his. A place he had built with his own hands after coming home from his last deployment. Quiet, remote, off the radar. Madeline leaned forward in the passenger seat as the truck rolled to a stop on the gravel drive. Her eyes swept across the clearing, taking in the scattered woodpile, the rusted water barrel near the porch, the faded blue door that stood crooked on its hinges. You live here? She asked, voice soft. Used to, Logan said. He killed the engine and stepped out, listening. The air felt wrong, too still. Madeline followed him, her arms wrapped tight around herself. She stood behind him as he climbed the steps and tried the door. It opened with a soft creak. The cabin was dark inside. Dust clung to the air, floating in the shafts of sunlight that cut through the windows. The fireplace was cold. The air smelled like damp wood and thyme. Logan stepped inside first. Madeline hesitated, glancing over her shoulder at the woods before following him in. At first, everything looked untouched. The old couch was still covered in the faded green blanket Emma had insisted they keep, even though it scratched. The bookshelf still sagged under the weight of his paperbacks and a dusty jar of coins. But then Logan noticed the kitchen drawer pulled halfway open. He never left it like that. He walked over, opened it fully, and frowned. The contents had been disturbed, moved around. Nothing was gone, not exactly, but it was off. Someone had gone through it. Madeline stood in the center of the room, turning in slow circles. "This place is beautiful," she said. Logan barely heard her. He crossed the room to the back hallway and opened the bedroom door. The window was cracked, not broken, but ajar in a way it should not have been. His jaw tightened. He came back out, his face unreadable. "Someone's been here." Madeline stopped moving. "Are you sure?" He nodded. "I don't leave drawers half open, and I damn sure don't leave windows cracked. Not in bear country." Her hands clutched the hem of her shirt. "Do you think it was him?" "I think it was someone who wanted to know if you'd come here. And I think we don't stay long enough to find out if they're coming back." She looked around again, but this time with different eyes. The warmth was gone. The safety she had just started to feel drained away, replaced by the same fear that had chased her from the church steps. "But where do we go now?" she asked. Logan walked to the fireplace and pulled out a bundle of papers tucked beneath the wood stack. He flipped through them quickly and pulled two out. IDs. One for him, one for her. Different names. Different states. "I've got a few backup plans." Madeline watched him as he moved around the cabin, collecting a few supplies, loading up a duffel bag. He moved with quiet urgency, muscle memory from another life. She stayed rooted in place, unable to shake the image of someone standing where she was now, sifting through drawers, deciding how to find her again. She barely noticed when he knelt in front of her and placed a hand gently on her arm. "Hey," he said. "I've got you, all right?" She nodded. "Yeah, okay." But she didn't sound okay. Not entirely. They left the cabin less than 10 minutes later. Logan checked the truck for trackers twice before they pulled out. Still, his eyes stayed glued to the rearview mirror. They drove for over an hour, winding back through old country roads, until they reached a small roadside diner with a rusted sign and faded red booths. The place was empty except for a woman behind the counter who barely looked up when they came in. Logan slid into the booth across from Madeline and ordered them both coffee. She cupped hers with both hands again, the way she always did. Her fingers still trembled. He pulled out a battered photo of Emma from his wallet and placed it between them on the table. "This is what I was fighting for when I built that cabin," he said. "A place she could come. Somewhere we could be us. No lawyers, no arguments, just peace." Madeline stared at the photo. Emma's smile was crooked, her hair pulled back in uneven pigtails. "She looks so happy," Madeline whispered. "She is," Logan said, "when she's with me, and I've only got her a couple weekends a month. Holidays if I'm lucky. Her mom's got the full-time spot, but she doesn't want it. She just wants to win." Madeline reached out and touched the photo gently. "She'd love the cabin." Logan smiled. "She already does. She calls it the fairy house. Says it's where the trees keep secrets." Madeline's lips twitched. "She sounds like someone I'd want to be friends with." "You'd like her?" Madeline looked up at him. "Do you think she'd like me?" "I think she'd ask you why you look so sad when you smile. And then she'd sit in your lap and tell you a joke about pancakes." Madeline laughed, real and quick, like a small bird flapping its wings for the first time. Logan leaned back, watching her. "You okay?" he asked. She nodded slowly. "Yeah, just everything's starting to sink in. The running, the hiding, the fact that I've completely dismantled my life in a matter of days. I'm not sure who I am right now." He looked at her carefully. "You're someone who chose to live. That's who you are." She looked away, blinking hard. The waitress dropped off a plate of fries without a word. Logan pushed them toward her, and she picked one up slowly. They sat in silence for a few minutes, eating fries and drinking coffee like the world outside wasn't closing in. When they finally left, the sky had shifted into the gold of early evening. They climbed back into the truck and drove west. No plan, just motion. Logan reached for the radio, turned the dial, and found an old country song playing. He let it play low, just enough to fill the silence with something that did not ask anything of them. Madeline rested her head against the window and closed her eyes. She did not sleep, not really, but she felt something soften in her chest. It was not peace, not yet, but it was a beginning. The next morning came with a surprise neither of them expected. Logan had parked the truck behind an old equipment shed on a friend's property just outside of Jackson, far enough off the highway to stay unnoticed, close enough to make a quick escape if they had to. His friend Ray was a retired trucker who lived alone with 2 dogs and more junked cars than he had tools to fix them. Ray owed Logan a favor from years back and had promised no questions asked. True to his word, Ray had handed over the keys to the guest trailer without blinking and said to holler if they needed hot food or clean water. It was not fancy. The bed creaked with every shift of weight, the water pressure in the tiny bathroom was almost non-existent, and the floor dipped in places that made walking and exercise imbalance. But it was quiet, and for a few hours, they could pretend they were just passing through on some strange vacation neither of them had planned. Logan stepped outside with a mug of coffee, scanning the tree line like he always did. His mind never really rested. Even when the night had been still and the stars wide above them, his ears stayed tuned to every crack of a branch or rustle of leaves. It was habit now, a part of him that refused to stand down, no matter how far he got from the battlefield. He took a sip and paused when he heard a car engine rolling up the gravel drive. At first, his muscles tensed. Then he caught sight of the familiar red sedan, and his jaw worked once before relaxing. Still, he did not wave. He waited. The car pulled up and parked near the barn. A woman stepped out, tall, blonde, dressed in a blazer too clean for the setting. She looked around with open irritation before turning her eyes to Logan. She did not wait for him to say anything. She asked for an early drop-off, she said. "I thought you might be somewhere more stable." Logan glanced toward the trailer just as the back door creaked open. Madeline stepped out, barefoot, wearing jeans that still sagged at the knees and a t-shirt she had cut to fit better. She froze when she saw the woman. The woman followed his gaze, her mouth tightening into something close to amusement. "Well," she said, "that answers a few questions." Before Logan could reply, the back door of the sedan opened and a little girl hopped out, dragging a small pink suitcase behind her. "Daddy," she called out. Logan's whole face changed. The hard lines in his brow melted into something softer, almost boyish. He stepped forward quickly and knelt to catch her as she barreled into his arms. "Hey there, Bug," he said, lifting her easily. "You're early." The girl grinned, showing 2 missing teeth and a smear of chocolate on her chin. "Grandma said we made good time, and Mommy said she had a meeting and couldn't keep me today." She looked over at the woman, then added in a whisper, "She said you probably weren't ready, but she didn't care." Logan chuckled quietly and set her down. The woman crossed her arms. "I expect her back by Sunday night. Not Monday morning, not whenever you decide to show up. Sunday, 8 p.m., sharp." Logan did not bother answering. She did not wait for one either. She got back in her car, and reversed out the drive with a spray of gravel, leaving behind nothing but the scent of expensive perfume and tension. Emma watched the car disappear with a shrug. "Can I have waffles?" she asked. Madeline finally exhaled and walked closer, brushing her hair behind her ear like she did when she felt exposed. Logan looked between them, unsure of how to close the space that had suddenly opened up. "Emma," he said, "this is Maddie. She's a friend of mine." Emma studied her. "Are you his girlfriend?" Madeline laughed awkwardly. "Not really, just company." Emma considered this, and then gave a decisive nod. "Okay." Madeline knelt down to her level. "You like waffles?" "I love waffles," Emma said, solemn. "With peanut butter and banana slices and the kind of syrup that tastes fake." Madeline grinned. "Then I'll see what I can do." By the time the sun crept higher, they were inside the trailer with a pan on the stove and 3 mismatched plates on the tiny fold-out table. Emma ate like she hadn't seen food in days, chattering between bites, telling Madeline about her hamster named Rocket and the song she was learning in her music class. Logan mostly watched them, his heart catching on the way Emma kept leaning toward Madeline like she was already part of something. After breakfast, they went outside. Emma ran through the weeds behind the barn with her arms spread like airplane wings. Madeline followed slowly, watching her with a strange smile. Logan stood nearby, arms crossed, silent. "She's amazing," Madeline said quietly. "She's my whole world," he replied. Madeline nodded. "I can see that." They fell into a rhythm over the next few hours. Emma dragged Madeline into a pretend treasure hunt with sticks and rocks. Logan fixed a fence along the edge of the property and kept one eye on the horizon. It felt almost like a real day, one of those rare things people take for granted. Laughter, food, sunshine, but it could not last. That evening, Logan sat on the porch steps, watching the shadows stretch across the trees. Emma had fallen asleep in the trailer, curled up in the corner with her stuffed unicorn. Madeline came outside and handed him a glass of cold tea. "She went out fast," she said. "She always does. Like her mom." They were quiet for a moment. "She still talk bad about you?" Madeline asked. Logan nodded. "Every chance she gets. Tells the court I'm unstable. Dangerous. Says Emma told her I scream in my sleep." "Do you?" He looked out at the trees. "Used to. Not so much lately." She took a slow sip and watched him. "She's wrong about you." He glanced at her. "You sure about that?" "I've seen what dangerous looks like," she said. "You're not it." The air between them stretched tight. Logan reached out slowly, his fingers brushing hers. She didn't pull away. "I haven't let anyone get close in a long time," he said. "I haven't let anyone stay," she replied. When he leaned in to kiss her, it was not sudden. It was the kind of moment that builds over days, layered in silence and unspoken understanding. His lips touched hers gently at first, testing, then firmer. She leaned into him, one hand resting on his chest. When they parted, she pressed her forehead against his. "We can't stay here forever," she whispered. "I know. But I want to," she added. "So do I." In the trailer, Emma stirred once in her sleep, murmuring about pirates and waffles. Outside, the stars blinked into the sky one by one. The danger was still coming, but for one night, they had found something real, something worth holding on to, even if it was just for a little while. The next morning began quietly, almost too quietly. The sun had barely climbed over the tree line when Logan stepped outside with a mug of black coffee, the mug older than some of his scars. The air was crisp, the kind that hinted at fall even though summer still clung to the edges of the morning. He took a slow breath and scanned the woods, letting his eyes follow the same route he had traced the evening before. Nothing moved, and yet he could not shake the sense that something had shifted. Inside the trailer, the sound of cartoon voices filtered out through a cracked window. Emma had discovered an old DVD player and was now fully immersed in a fuzzy episode of a show that Logan barely remembered agreeing to let her watch. Madeline sat beside her on the floor, brushing through Emma's hair with gentle strokes and a quiet attentiveness that Logan could not stop watching. There was something about the way they moved around each other, like a rhythm had already started between them without either noticing. It was natural, easy. It scared the hell out of him. He finished his coffee and went back inside just as Emma shouted excitedly at the screen. Madeline looked up and smiled, and he tried to smile back, but it came out crooked. She noticed, and her smile faded a little. "You okay?" she asked. He nodded, but not convincingly. "Just thinking." Madeline looked at him a second longer, then turned her attention back to Emma. "I think this one's going to be an artist," she said. "She sees colors like their stories." Emma beamed. "I made a whole drawing of Daddy and me and you. You were wearing a crown." Madeline laughed. "Of course I was." Logan felt something shift in his chest, something tight and tangled. He turned away before either of them could see it. Later, when Emma was outside collecting rocks and humming to herself, Logan stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing out a plate. Madeline leaned against the counter, arms folded, watching him. "She loves you," she said. "I know. No, I mean, she really loves you. You can tell. She feels safe around you. She's the one thing I ever got right." Madeline looked down, brushing a crumb off her shirt. "Do you ever think about fighting for full custody again?" He dried the plate slowly, considering his words. "I've thought about it every day since the judge handed down the order, but thinking doesn't pay for lawyers. And the last one told me straight out that unless her mom hands over custody willingly, I'd be throwing money into a fire." Madeline's voice dropped. "What if she did?" Logan looked at her. "What if her mother just gave up? I mean, you said she's more interested in winning than parenting. That kind of person doesn't stay interested forever." He leaned back against the counter. "Maybe, but I can't count on that. I've already counted on too much and come up short." There was a pause. Then Madeline stepped closer, her voice low. "What if we found a way to make this permanent? You, me, Emma? A place they can't reach, a name they can't touch." Logan looked into her eyes. For a second, he let himself imagine it. The three of them in a quiet town, maybe somewhere north, maybe somewhere that snow came thick in winter and nobody asked questions. He imagined Emma walking to school with a backpack too big for her frame, imagined Madeline in a bookstore or behind a counter with her sleeves rolled up and sunlight in her hair. He imagined himself coming home to them, not just passing through, being steady, real. But then Emma burst in from the porch, dragging a handful of sticks and shouting about building a fairy fort, and the moment passed. Later that afternoon, Logan stepped outside to make a call. Ray had left town for a few days and told him to check in if anything felt off. Logan dialed twice and got voicemail both times. It was probably nothing, but still, the silence made his nerves itch. When he came back in, the trailer was quiet. Emma was curled up on the couch with a book, her head resting against a pillow. Madeline was in the kitchen rinsing dishes. She did not look up when he entered. Something about the set of her shoulders made him pause. "What's wrong?" he asked. She dried her hands on a towel. "Emma said something. I didn't know if I should tell you." He waited. "She said her mom told her that you always screw things up, that you never finish what you start." Logan's jaw tightened. "She didn't say it like she believed it," Madeline added quickly. "She was just repeating it, but I thought you should know." He nodded once, trying to hold in the emotion rising in his throat. "I'm sorry," she said. "You don't have to be." "Yes, I do. You've done everything right. You've protected us. You've protected her. You're the best father I've ever seen, and I grew up surrounded by men who could buy the moon but didn't know how to hug their kids." He stepped past her, walked toward the door. "Logan," she said, following him. "I need a minute." She caught his arm. "Don't shut me out. Not now." He turned to face her, and there was fire in his voice when he finally spoke. I have done everything I can to be what she needs. I've bent myself in ways no man should have to, just to get a few hours with my daughter. And still I'm the villain in some courtroom fantasy her mother spins because it makes her feel better about leaving. And now I've got you and her here, and it's starting to feel like something real, something I might actually get to keep, and I'm scared to death it's going to fall apart just like everything else. Madeleine's eyes filled, but she did not look away. I'm not her, and I'm not going anywhere. He shook his head. You should. You still can. You've got a shot at a life that doesn't involve looking over your shoulder or living in a trailer on borrowed land. She stepped closer. I don't want that life. I want this one. I don't know if I can be what you need, he said, voice barely above a whisper. You already are. She reached up and cupped his face with one hand, steady and sure. You think you failed, but all I see is someone who never gave up. He leaned into her touch, eyes closed. I don't know how to stop running, he said. Then keep running, she replied, her voice trembling now. Just don't do it without me. They stood there, hearts pounding, the air between them thick with everything unsaid. Behind them, Emma stirred and called out from the couch. Madeleine turned, but Logan caught her hand. Let's go, he said. She looked at him. Go where? Anywhere they won't find us. Anywhere we can be ours. She nodded, eyes burning. I'm ready. So they packed their few things in silence, waking Emma gently and telling her it was time for another adventure. And this time, they left not just because they were afraid. They left because they were choosing something. They were choosing each other. The next town they passed through was little more than a stretch of road and a handful of sagging storefronts. The sun was low, casting long shadows across weathered brick and chipped signs. Logan drove slowly, his eyes on the rearview mirror more than the road ahead. They had been careful since leaving the trailer behind, doubling back on back roads, changing routes, avoiding anything that might leave a digital trace. But no matter how far they went, the feeling still followed them. That hum of being watched, of being one step away from the past, catching up. Emma sat in the back seat with her headphones on, legs tucked up under her, humming softly to whatever song she had picked. Madeleine sat beside Logan, her fingers laced together in her lap. She had barely spoken since they left, and when she did, it was in quiet fragments. Logan had not asked questions. He had learned when to give her silence. They pulled into a gravel lot behind an old mechanic's shop that looked half abandoned. Logan killed the engine and scanned the area. No movement, no sign of anyone nearby. He climbed out and walked around the truck, checking the tires and the undercarriage. He had done it 3 times already that day, but he still bent down, still ran his hands over the same spots. Madeleine stepped out too, stretching her legs and rubbing at her neck. She looked toward the shop, its windows covered in grime, the front door slightly ajar. Think anyone's in there? She asked. If they are, they're not doing much business. He walked over to the building and pushed the door open. A small bell jingled somewhere out of sight. Inside, the shop was dark and stale, with the smell of oil and rust. He stepped in slowly, letting his eyes adjust. It took a moment to realize someone was sitting behind the counter. An older man, face lined by sun and time, leaned back in a chair with a newspaper folded across his chest. His eyes opened lazily, landing on Logan without much interest. You need help? The man asked. Maybe. Looking for directions. To where? Anywhere south. The man scratched his chin. You a cop? No. Then take Route 17 to the junction. Head west until the gas station with the eagle sign. South's easier from there. Logan nodded once. Appreciate it. The man gave a vague wave of his hand and leaned back again. Outside, Madeleine stood by the truck, her eyes on the street beyond the lot. She didn't speak until Logan reached her. We're being watched. He followed her gaze. Across the street, a black SUV sat half hidden behind a feed store sign, engine off, windows tinted dark. Logan's gut twisted. "Get in the truck," he said. Maitland didn't argue. She opened the back door, lifted Emma gently into the front seat, and climbed in behind her. Logan slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The SUV didn't move. Not yet. He backed out slow, keeping his eyes on the mirror. As soon as they pulled onto the road, the SUV followed. "They're not being subtle," Maitland said. "No reason to be anymore," Logan replied. "They know we see them." Emma pulled her headphones down. "Is that the bad guys?" Logan kept his voice calm. "Could be." "Are we going to lose them?" He smiled without humor. "We're sure going to try." He drove like a man who knew every turn mattered. Through side streets, alleys, shortcuts that only locals would know. But the SUV kept following. It didn't speed up. It didn't back off. It just stayed there, like a shadow with wheels. Logan took a sudden left down a narrow road that wound through a patch of woods. Dirt kicked up behind them, and branches scraped along the sides of the truck. They bumped and jostled as the path narrowed. "Where are we going?" Maitland asked, gripping the seat. "There's a spot up ahead. Used to be a service trail. If they're following us on instinct, they'll take the bait." He slammed the brakes just as they reached a fork in the road. Without stopping fully, he turned hard to the right and kept going. The SUV followed a second later, turning left. Logan exhaled once, then turned off his headlights and slowed to a crawl. They drove in near silence for a few more minutes until the road opened into a clearing. Logan stopped the truck and stepped out, eyes scanning the treetops. "They took the wrong turn," Maitland said, stepping out beside him. "For now." Emma remained in the front seat, quiet but alert. Logan walked to the rear of the truck and opened the toolbox, pulling out a small black case. Inside was a compact rifle and a set of binoculars. Maitland watched him work, her eyes calm but full of questions. "We're not going to run this time, are we?" she asked. "No," Logan said. "Not tonight." They waited. The sun slipped behind the trees, and the air cooled. Logan perched on a fallen log near the edge of the clearing, the rifle resting across his lap. Maitland sat beside him, her knees drawn up, arms wrapped around them. The first sound came just after dark. Tires on gravel, then voices, low and clipped. Logan motioned for silence and moved toward the sound. He crouched low behind a boulder and waited. Two men stepped into the clearing from the trail's opposite end. One was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing all black. The other was leaner, with a scar down his jaw and a phone in his hand. "She's not here," the lean one said. "Truck's gone. Boss said she'd come through this way." "She probably did, but Shaw's smarter than we thought." Logan raised the rifle slightly, his finger hovering just above the trigger. Maitland stepped up beside him, quiet as breath. "They're his people," she whispered. "Fiancé?" She nodded. "The one with the scar is his brother. Name's Pierce. He's the fixer." They watched in silence as the two men circled the area, checking for signs, muttering about tire tracks and dead ends. Logan exhaled slowly and stood. Pierce turned at the sound, just as the other man reached for a weapon. "Don't," Logan said. "You'll regret it." Maitland stepped into view beside him, her hands at her sides. Pierce stared. "Well, that was easy." "I'm not going back," she said. "You don't have a choice." Logan raised the rifle a little. "She does." Pierce's lip curled. "You think you scare me, Shaw? You're a mechanic with a hero complex. And you're a thug with a mouth full of bad timing." Pierce took a step forward, but the rifle stayed steady. The other man hesitated. "This is your only warning," Logan said. "You come near her again, I'll make sure you can't walk back." Pierce looked at Maitland. "You're throwing everything away for a guy who lives in a truck and hides in the woods." She didn't flinch. "No, I'm choosing someone who doesn't treat me like a thing to own." Pierce's eyes flicked to the rifle again. He weighed his options. Then he lifted his hands in a slow, mocking surrender. "We'll find you," he said. "You can't keep running." Maitland stepped forward. Watch me." They backed away, slowly, and then they were gone. Logan lowered the rifle and looked at her. "You all right?" She nodded. "I meant what I said," she added. "I don't want to run anymore, but if I have to, I want to do it on my terms, with you." Logan looked at the trees, then at the truck, then at her. "Then we keep going, but we don't run scared anymore." She reached for his hand, and he took it. For the first time in days, they stood without moving. Not because they had nowhere to go, but because they had decided what to run toward. The cabin sat at the edge of a small lake, tucked between two ridges where the trees grew thick and the sky opened up just enough to catch the light. Logan found it through a man he had served with in Kandahar, a quiet guy who now worked for a land surveyor and owed Logan a favor he had never had the chance to repay. The place was off the grid, just a mile from a defunct ranger station, and half an hour from the nearest town that boasted little more than a diner and a one-pump gas station. There was no cell service, no neighbors, and no curious eyes, just wind, water, and silence. They arrived just before dusk. The road had turned from asphalt to gravel, then from gravel to dirt, and then it disappeared altogether, becoming little more than two worn tracks winding through the forest. When the truck finally rumbled to a stop, Emma looked out the window and let out a long, low whistle. "Is this ours?" she asked. Logan turned to face her, smiling faintly. "It is now." Madeline stepped out of the truck and stood in the clearing, one hand shielding her eyes from the setting sun. She turned slowly in a full circle, taking it all in. The wooden porch sagged slightly on the left side. Ivy climbed the chimney like it had been invited. The lake shimmered just past the tree line, still and silver in the dying light. She looked back at Logan. "This place looks like it could be in a storybook." He nodded. "That's the idea." Inside, the cabin was small but solid. The front room held a wood stove, a battered couch, and a round table tucked into a corner by the window. The kitchen was little more than a sink, a counter, and a propane stove. 2 rooms opened off the back, one with bunk beds, the other with a full-size bed and a window that faced the lake. Emma raced to the bunk room and threw her backpack on the bottom bunk. "I claim this one," she shouted. Logan set down the last of their supplies and took a long breath. He watched Madeline as she moved through the space, her fingers brushing the dusty windowsill, her eyes scanning the walls like she was waiting for something to vanish. "You think they'll find us here?" she asked. "If they do, it won't be any time soon," he said. "I pulled strings, burned a few bridges. This place doesn't exist in any official system." Madeline turned toward him. She looked different now, lighter. Her hair was shorter than when they first met, chopped bluntly just past her shoulders. She wore jeans that finally fit, and a sweatshirt that belonged to Logan but looked better on her. She had not worn makeup in days. Her face was bare and calm and real. They made dinner together that night. Nothing complicated. Canned soup, some bread, hot tea, the kind of meal that tasted better because of the silence around it. They ate by candlelight and washed the dishes by hand, laughing when the water pump sputtered and coughed like it had not been used in years. After Emma had gone to bed, her small form curled up under a mountain of blankets, Logan and Madeline sat outside on the porch. The stars had come out, dozens of them, maybe hundreds. In the city you could only see a few, but here the sky stretched out wide and endless. Madeline held a mug of tea in her hands and leaned against the railing. "I could stay here," she said softly. "Not just hide. Really stay." Logan looked at her. "You sure?" She nodded. "I don't want to go back to who I was before, even if they stopped chasing me tomorrow. That life, that version of me, it doesn't exist anymore. She died on the side of the road in a wedding dress." He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he set his mug down and pulled something from his pocket. It was a small envelope, worn and creased. He held it out to her. "What is it?" "New names, new IDs, everything we need to start over." She took the envelope, opened it slowly. Inside were 2 plastic cards. Her photo looked strange next to a name she had never heard before. "You did all this already?" she asked. "I had a feeling you'd say yes." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "This is more than yes, Logan. This is me choosing a future." He reached for her hand. "There's one more thing," he said. He led her back inside, where a small tin box waited on the table. He opened it and pulled out a simple ring. No diamond, just a slim band with a brushed surface and a tiny engraved mountain on the inside. "I can't give you a church or a crowd or even a real last name yet," he said. "But I can give you a promise that I'll stand with you, that I'll protect you, that this isn't just about running, it's about building something worth standing still for." Madeline stared at the ring, her throat tight. "I don't need the rest," she whispered. "Just you, just Emma, just this." He slid the ring onto her finger, and it fit perfectly. They said nothing more. They did not need to. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Slow mornings, long walks to the lake. Emma spent hours building forts from branches and pretending she was a forest queen. Madeline started writing again, filling notebooks with pages she never showed anyone, her pen scratching late into the night. Logan fixed the porch, chopped wood, repaired the hinges on every door. He kept his rifle near but never had to touch it. The silence held. They learned to live without waiting for footsteps, without checking the rearview mirror. They were no longer fugitives. They were a family. One afternoon, Logan came in from a walk to find Madeline sitting on the edge of the dock, her knees pulled to her chest. She looked up as he approached. "I have something to tell you," she said. His chest tightened. "What is it?" She took his hand, placed it on her stomach. He stared at her. "You're sure?" She nodded. "I found out 2 days ago. I wanted to wait until the moment felt right." He knelt in front of her, his hands still on her, his voice thick. "We're having a baby?" She smiled, tears slipping down her cheeks. "Yes." He pulled her close, and they stayed that way, quiet, full of something neither had known they would ever have again. Hope. This wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning. Winter came slowly to the lake, first in the early dark, then in the way the wind shifted direction, cold and clean and sharper than before. The trees, once heavy with green, shed their leaves until the forest stood bare and still. Frost edged the windows each morning, and the lake grew quiet under a veil of mist. The cabin held warmth in its wooden bones, though the wood stove had to be fed regularly and blankets lay thick across every surface. Inside, the days were slower, deeper. Time moved differently now, shaped more by rhythm than urgency. Logan woke early each morning to split wood, making enough noise to wake the birds, but not Emma, who had started sleeping later as the nights grew longer. Madeline usually stirred soon after, one hand resting on the growing curve of her belly, the other rubbing sleep from her eyes as she made her way to the kitchen. She had never looked more beautiful to him, not in a fragile, perfect way, in the way storms are beautiful, in the way mountains feel real. She carried herself with a quiet strength now, grounded by her choice to stay, to build, to love without holding back. Logan made breakfast most mornings while she scribbled in her notebook by the fire. Sometimes she shared pieces of what she wrote, little scenes, glimpses of memory, dreams not yet fully formed. Other times she just smiled and closed the pages, holding them close like something sacred. Emma had taken to the new life as if she had been born for it. She hiked through the woods each afternoon with Logan, collecting pine cones and animal tracks, pointing out every deer, path, and squirrel nest like a seasoned ranger. She asked endless questions, most of which Logan answered patiently, and a few he redirected with a chuckle and a shrug. It had been 4 months since they arrived at the cabin. 4 months without contact from anyone. No more black SUVs, no shadowed figures, no letters or threats. Either Harrison had given up or realized that chasing Madeline only made her disappear deeper into herself. Or maybe he had simply found someone else to control, someone more willing. Either way, silence was the closest thing to freedom they had felt in a long time. One day, just after New Year's, a letter arrived. It came folded inside an envelope with no return address, dropped off by a park ranger who delivered supplies once a month in exchange for firewood and good conversation. Logan opened it at the kitchen table while Madeline stood behind him, her hand resting gently on his shoulder. The letter was from Logan's ex-wife. It was short, just a few sentences. She was leaving the state, moving overseas with her new husband. The courts had approved her transfer. She had filed to relinquish full custody of Emma. The documents were enclosed, ready for signing. Logan sat very still for a long time after reading it. Then he stood, walked to the other room, and looked at his daughter, curled up with a book on the couch, her mouth moving silently as she read each line aloud to herself. Madeline stood in the doorway, her eyes full of cautious hope. "What does it mean?" she asked. He turned to her. "It means Emma's mine. For good." The tears came slow at first, from both of them, then harder, as the weight they had carried for years slipped free. Logan walked back to the table, pulled out a pen, and signed the papers. Later that night, after Emma had gone to bed and the snow began to fall, Logan and Madeline stepped out onto the porch together. They watched the flakes drift down onto the lake, landing like ash across the frozen water. "Do you think she knows how big this is?" Madeline asked softly. "She'll feel it, even if she can't name it yet." They stood in silence for a while, the cold creeping in around their boots, their breath fogging in the air. "I never thought life would look like this," she said. "I thought love was something that came with rules, with contracts, with conditions." Logan looked at her. "And now?" "Now I think love is this. Right here. No one watching, no one judging. Just waking up every day with the same choice, to stay." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a second ring. It was simple, made of silver, with a small blue stone set into the band. Not expensive, not flashy, just hers. "This one's real," he said. "No paperwork, no license, no witnesses. Just me asking you, again, if you'll be mine." Madeline looked down at the ring, then back at him. Her eyes were wet with joy. "I've been yours since the first night I got into that truck," she said. "I just didn't know it yet." He slipped the ring onto her finger, and she held out her hand, admiring it in the snowlight. "I guess this means we need a ceremony," she teased. Logan grinned. "I think we're already living it." They did not throw a wedding, not in the traditional sense. But a week later, they stood by the lake at sunrise, with Emma wrapped in a scarf between them, holding 2 pine cones like flower bouquets. Madeline wore a dress she had sewn from 2 old quilts, and Logan wore his cleanest flannel. They read vows they had written by hand, promises that had nothing to do with forever and everything to do with today. They sealed it with a kiss, and Emma clapped and cheered, then demanded hot chocolate. That night, as they sat by the fire with their feet tangled under a shared blanket and the baby inside her kicked softly against his palm, Logan leaned in and whispered something he had never said aloud. "I stopped running." Madeline turned to look at him. "When?" "The day you asked me to keep going, and I realized I didn't want to run from anything anymore. I just wanted to run toward you." She smiled and rested her head on his shoulder. "Then let's keep going," she said. "Just not in fear." He nodded. "Not in fear." They fell asleep like that, curled together on the couch, firelight flickering across the walls, snow still falling outside the windows. It would be hard at times. Life always was. There would be sickness and sleepless nights and bills they forgot to pay. There would be broken things and harsh words and moments of silence they did not know how to fill. But there would also be laughter and warmth and safety. There would be a family. And though it had all started with a runaway bride on the side of a rainy road and an ex-soldier who had given up on second chances, it had become something else entirely. A home, a life, a love that did not need escape. They had not stopped running. They had just stopped running, scared.